Let's take a trip down my gaming memory lane with Driver 2. Driver 2, the name itself evokes a mix of nostalgia, frustration, and perhaps a touch of bewildered fondness. Released in 2000, the sequel to the groundbreaking Driver, Driver 2, had enormous shoes to fill. It aimed for the stars, promising a sprawling open world, a complex narrative, and a deep dive into the gritty world of undercover police work. While it didn't quite reach that velocity, its ambition and unique qualities cemented it a place in gaming history, even if it's remembered for its flaws more than its triumphs. Now, what I remember about Driver 2? Driver 2 was a hugely anticipated title for me personally. I fell in love with the original game and just wanted more. Driver 2 gave me more of the same, but added in plenty more for myself and other fans of the series. Now, the core concept remained the same in Driver 2. You were John Tanner, an undercover cop tasked with infiltrating a Brazilian crime syndicate. The narrative, while convoluted at times, attempted a more cinematic approach than its predecessor. The cutscenes, however, they were a bit stilted and unintentionally hilarious due to the era's graphical limitations. They tried to weave a tale of betrayal, double crosses, and high-stake missions. The story, while not Shakespearean, was engaging enough to keep you pushing through the often punishing gameplay. More on that later. Driver 2's biggest selling point, and perhaps its most enduring legacy, was its open world. While not the first game to feature one, it certainly was one of the most ambitious for its time. Exploring cities like Chicago, Havana, Rio de Janeiro, and Las Vegas was all thrilling. The scale felt genuinely impressive, and the freedom to roam, even outside of the missions, was a novelty. Cruising down the sun-drenched streets of Rio, with its bustling markets and vibrant atmosphere, was a truly memorable experience. However, this ambition came at a cost. The technology of the time struggled to keep up with the game's vision. The frame rate was notoriously erratic, often dipping into single digits during intense chases. The draw distance was limited, leading to pop-in and the sense of the world being somewhat artificial. These technical issues, while understandable given the game's scope, significantly hampered the overall experience. Beyond the technical hiccups, Driver 2's gameplay also suffered from inconsistencies. The driver mechanics, while generally solid, could feel clunky and unpredictable. Collisions were often jarring, and the physics engine, while aiming for realism, sometimes produced bizarre and comical results. The missions themselves were often frustratingly difficult, demanding pixel-perfect precision and an almost masochistic level of patience. Failing a mission often meant restarting from the very beginning, a design choice that felt particularly punishing. Despite its flaws, Driver 2 possessed a certain charm. The atmosphere was palpable, the soundtrack was fantastic, much more on point with the vision of the game this time around. Definitely hit that 1970s vibe. The sense of immersion when the game wasn't actively fighting you was genuinely impressive. The game's ambition, even if it fell short of its goals, was commendable. It pushed the boundaries of what was possible in open-world gaming, paving the way for a future title that would refine and perfect the formula. I think we all know what that was.
See what that guy did?
Driver 2 was an ambitious game for its time. The ambition led to several development challenges. Now you gotta remember, this game released on the PlayStation 1.
I'm talking about this. It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut.
This was well before we had a Grand Theft Auto 3. The PlayStation 1 had significant hardware limitations. Driver 2 attempted to create large, open-world cities, which pushed the console to its absolute breaking point. The results? The game often suffered from severe frame rate drops. This made the game incredibly difficult to play. Objects and textures would appear suddenly and in the distance that would definitely break gameplay and immersion. Something we can't really put up with these days. When it comes to these games, we kind of forgive it. Implementing the ability to get out of the car was a totally new feature that added complexity and put further strain on the hardware, not to mention the developers themselves. The addition of exiting the vehicle and expanded world spaces, while added to the game, it added to the complexity of the development process as well. This led to many of the bugs that we see and the performance issues that the game suffered from. It really makes you wonder, if they had taken a little bit longer on this game, what could have came from the Driver series after Driver 2? I mean, we were only a couple of years away from a PlayStation 2 at this point. Maybe we could have seen a competitor for GTA back then. But Driver 2 expanded upon the driving mechanics of its predecessor while introducing the significant addition of on-foot exploration. In essence, Driver 2 attempted to blend driving and on-foot exploration. But technically, the limitations of the PlayStation 1 just couldn't allow it, and it resulted in some gameplay and control issues. Now let's talk about the driving mechanics of the game, what we really have at the core of this game. So the basic controls were fairly standard for its time, involving an acceleration, a burnout, a brake, and steering. Now the handbrake felt much more crucial for sharp turns and maneuvers this time around. Definitely didn't feel like you needed to use it a whole lot in Driver 1. Now the vehicle physics, they aimed for a realism. Through the PlayStation 1's limitations though, it affected precision of the handling that we really wanted from a Driver 2 to see it really step up from Driver 1. The cars are going to handle quite a bit like they did in Driver 1, so don't expect any major changes here. Cars could sustain damage, and the hubcaps could fly off. That added a nice little touch of realism as well. Now, mission structure. Missions primarily involve driving with certain objectives in place. Chasing or escaping other vehicles, following targets, and reaching specific locations within certain time limits. Now let's talk about that a little bit more here. I want to elaborate on that. I personally ran into a ton of frustration when it comes to chasing other vehicles. The vehicle may get a block away from you on a single road with no turns, and the game will tell you you've lost your target. This was unacceptable for me, especially now. Made it extremely difficult. Unfortunately, to this day, I still don't understand why this type of mission structure was put in the game. Another problem was the keeping up or following targets. Just terrible directions that they gave you when you were doing these. You know, you would literally be told you're too slow and you're too fast within 1 second of each other. It became increasingly frustrating, but they were less frustrating than the chasing sequences because there are some extremely difficult chase sequences in this game. Be warned, if you want to jump in and play this, you will have a struggle on your hands. Now let's talk about the city environments. Overall, the game featured large open world cities, allowing for free roaming. However, the draw distance and the frame rate issues could hinder the driving experience when it came down to this. But it was cool to take a ride in these large open world cities, multiple of them to play around in. It was quite a lot of fun, and it was just really interesting to see how they just put this all together back then. Now, on foot gameplay. Exiting the vehicle, a key new feature. Big deal back then. I remember playing this and just thinking it was absolutely insane. I can get out of the car now and do stuff. However, it did create problems. The control scheme for this is a bit strange. You have to press X to run, and you just move your character with the stick or the D-pad. So if you're not pressing X, you're not really moving. You can push up, but you move slower. And to walk backwards, you either need to spin a circle while you're continuing to press X, or you need to hold down, and it's kind of like reverse. It's very weird. It kind of feels like you're driving your character more than you're controlling your character, which is very strange. But it did add a layer of gameplay that was relatively novel, especially for the console of its time. Like it was definitely something that kind of blew your mind. Now, another cool thing you could do this time around with Tanner was you could hijack other vehicles. This allowed you for Quick changes of transport also would drop your felony, which was kind of a nice feature. If you were getting hunted by the cops, you'd get away from the cops long enough and swap into another car, you would lose your felony, which is very similar to what Grand Theft Auto uses as the star or the wanted level. So that was actually pretty cool and did come in pretty handy a few times for me in my gameplay. Let's talk a little bit more in depth on graphics and sound, mainly focusing on graphics here. But the game looks and sounds especially good considering the technology of its time. Honestly, gotta admit, the soundtrack is really good. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I enjoyed the music in the game quite a bit. You do hear it a lot, especially restarting missions. You're going to hear the same stuff over and over and over. However, none of it got really irritating or annoying, and the overall quality of the sounds with voice acting and everything was also really good. But diving deeper into the game design and the graphics, I thought especially the cutscenes this time around, which you'll see on screen, are much better than they were in Driver 1. Everything seemed to be like really far away in Driver 1. Things weren't in front of you to where you could really, see details. They kind of pushed them off into a distance so you couldn't even really tell what, Tanner looked like. Now that's totally different this time around. You can see exactly what Tanner looks like. You can see the lip syncing works pretty decent for its age.
Had his mouth filled by a Mauser clip and his gums glued up before they set light to his head.
You got your partner involved and you see all the other bad guys and the enemies. They can move a little janky at times, but considering we were on a PlayStation 1, there's not a whole lot to complain about, honestly. This was an amazing leap when it come from Driver 1 to Driver 2 when it came to the cutscenes. The models of the characters looked quite a bit better. The graphics of the actual gameplay, though, pretty much the same. Maybe a touch better when it comes to the vehicles. There were many more vehicles to drive and choose from this time around, it felt like, especially when you're getting in and out of them now because you're able to hijack those vehicles. So all of those models looked great. Still a little blocky, just the way we expect from a PlayStation 1 title. There was a notch up, you could tell. But overall, I feel like this really did show we have a better game on our hands this time around. Now, the overall reception for Driver 2 at its release, that was somewhat mixed. While it achieved commercial success, critical reception was less than enthusiastic compared to its predecessor. Now, to break it down a little bit, critics acknowledged the game's ambition, particularly the addition of on-foot exploration and large open-world environments. However, the game was heavily criticized for its technical flaws. I don't think that's changed any in 2025. It's still the same way today. But those issues did include things like poor frame rate, pop-up issues, bugs, and glitches that did happen often. The uneven difficulty and sometimes frustrating mission design also drew criticism. Still would draw criticism today. This game is notoriously difficult. I say this game is more difficult than the original. The commercial success, despite mixed reviews, Driver 2 was a commercial success, selling very well for its time. This indicated that many players were drawn to the game's innovative features. And we know we ended up getting a Driver 3 out of this. So we'll be talking about that more on the channel in the future. A large portion of the negative critical reception was due to its limitations. The game was very ambitious and the console struggled to keep up. Also came out the time the open world genre was evolving rapidly and games like Grand Theft Auto series were starting to make a large impact. Driver 2 was a game of great ambition that was hampered by technical difficulties and limitations. It achieved commercial success, but critical reception was mixed due to performance issues and gameplay frustrations. What is the legacy of Driver 2 then? I would say the Driver 2 legacy is kind of complex. It was marked by both ambition, innovation, and technical shortcomings. It pioneered on-foot exploration. So Driver 2 is remembered for being one of the early console games to successfully integrate on-foot exploration into a driving-focused game experience. This feature, while imperfect, laid the groundwork for future open-world games. An expansion of the open-world genre. The game's large open-world cities contributed to the evolution of the open-world genre for sure. It demonstrated the potential for more expansive and immersive virtual environments. Driver 2 serves as a cautionary tale about challenges of pushing hardware limitations. Its technical flaws highlighted the importance of balancing ambition with technical feasibility. But despite the flaws, Driver 2 retained a nostalgic appeal among many gamers. Its ambitious features and unique atmosphere have earned it a cult following. There is also a growing community of people that are working on modding the game and improving it, which shows the lasting impact of the game. One of those games out there is actually called Redriver. You can pick this up modded right on your PC today and check it out. It is a gorgeous modded version of Driver 2. While not always directly credited, Driver 2 contributed to the development of open world game design. It attempts to blend driving, on-foot gameplay, all at the same time, with refined mechanics. So it is important to understand that Driver 2 was a stepping stone in the evolution of the open world driving game. It helped pave the way for games that could come later and refine that formula. To wrap things up, Driver 2 is a game that's difficult to recommend wholeheartedly in the modern era. Its technical issues and frustrating gameplay will likely turn off many players. However, for those who can appreciate its historical context and are willing to overlook its shortcomings, Driver 2 offers a unique and often memorable experience. It's a flawed gem, a testament to the ambition of its creators, and a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of open world gaming. It may not be a classic, but it's certainly a game that deserves to be remembered in my book. I hope you enjoyed my look back into Driver 2. Let's talk more in the comments. Be sure to leave your thoughts, and if you like these videos, hit the like button, and to see more from the channel, be sure to follow and subscribe. The Driver saga will continue. Thanks for watching, and until next time, grab a controller and play it loud.